Once again, welcome to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Hall of Fame wrestling writer, broadcaster, and announcer Jason Bryant, and today I finish up the Dan Hodge Tribute Series with Jack Roller from World of Wrestling. If you are unfamiliar with Jack Roller, then you really haven't seen the youth wrestling game for, the past 40 years, because when you hear Tulsa, when you hear Reno, you hear kids wrestling, Jack Roller, World of Wrestling is the name you're going to hear. And he has been bringing Dan Hodge to his tournament for decades, at least until Dan's passing back in December. So we'll get Jack Roller's input on why Dan Hodge was introduced to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of youth wrestlers and future wrestling champions through World of Wrestling events. Before we get to that series, I want to let you know we're coming off of some trips to Guatemala. We're coming off Hall of Fame Honors Weekend. If you are interested in some of that cool content before I release it on the Hall of Fame Legends series, check out the Patreon channel. Check out my Rockfin channel. You can contribute to the Matt Talk Podcast Network by going to matttalkonline.com/contribute. If you're a patron via Patreon, or if you're a subscriber through Rockfin, you're going to get some of the cool videos I did. I tried something new here, folks. I've got some technology. I actually won a drawing for a piece of equipment that I wouldn't have otherwise bought, but I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, you know what? Maybe I can plug in my iPad to the top of this tripod, run my audio recorder off of a clamp, get the audio for the Legends podcast, run that audio into the iPad, hit record using this iRig device, and maybe I can get some video out of it. Now, I am not typically a video content guy, but you know what? If it's there, I'm going to use it. Now, a couple things that are a little wonky, I needed to actually click a different setting. So right now it's the old square 640 by 480. Next time I use it, it'll be mounted to the tripod, and we will actually get that nice little 1080 video, or 720 in this case. I'm not really in this situation where I feel like I need to produce 1080 video. I'm not a game streamer, although you can see some of my stuff on Twitch. And I will have some upcoming interviews with Chance Leonard from The Price of Legacy, a documentary that's coming out on June 15th about Perry, Oklahoma, which does also feature Dan Hodge. And I'm also going to talk with Heath Esslinger coming up about the FCA event that's coming up June 18th. So keep an eye out on those on upcoming editions of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Hall of Fame Honors Weekend, a little different this year. It was a great time, and from a personal perspective, I covered Jermil Byers. I'm very good friends with Gary Abbott, and I'm very good friends with Bill Zadek. So to see three of those four, and I didn't quite have the relationship with Bruce Burnett and, of course, the outstanding American Carl Eschenbach I actually had on the State of Wrestling podcast from the NWCA. You can go back and listen to that to get some insight on what Carl does. He's kind of a big deal in that old venture capital world. And then Tim Shields, Minnesota guy, sat down, learned more about him and his coaching career, more so than his officiating career, which we've seen for a while. But a lot of those things coming from Hall of Fame Honors Weekend. 2 days separated instead of normally unveiling everything on Friday night. I love the Friday night, but it's a little chaotic. So an opportunity to sit down and get some really, really good insight. And those are forthcoming on the Hall of Fame Legends podcast series. Yes, I still have things from 2019 to release, but we've got 50 years of Fargo coming up, at least on the Junior Nationals. So the Fargo Almanac is for sale, fargoalmanac.com. Every place winner, every state. I'm still working on adding even more stuff to it. But the kicker is it's $20. You buy it once. It's like the Moen faucets. Buy it for looks, buy it for life. Well, you buy this almanac one time, you get annual updates for free. Yes, you go to Gumroad and buy it, or fargoalmanac.com is the link. You buy it, and then the next year when the updated stats are there, you're going to get an email when I make an update, and you're not going to have to pay for that. I'm not going to pay, I'm not going to charge you $20 a year for updates from Flow Arena. That's just not how I operate. So it is a great value. It's a great historical piece. And with 50 years of junior freestyle coming up, next year will be 50 years of Greco and 20 years of women's freestyle. So it's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe when it comes to Fargo. They've also added a tournament to Fargo, the Last Chance World Team Trials qualifier, starting the day before. So as if you didn't need another reason to drive up ye old Fargo way and hang out with us at the Fargo Dome and the turf and herding horns and B-dubs, maybe even bucks if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not into the Roadhouse thing anymore. The name is Dalton, but that's what we've got coming up. So a little update on Hall of Fame Honors Weekend, what's coming down the pipe here on the network, and how you can contribute. MattTalkOnline.com/contribute. I've got the Discord chat up and running. So if you're interested in joining our community over there, it's already grown to 70 wrestling fans, okay? This isn't even a month old, and we've got daily conversations, whether it be we're talking about wrestling, we're talking about news, we're talking about goofy tweets, it's just basically sitting around with your buddies, and you know what? You guys contribute to the network, and that's another way to ask me quick questions. I mean, I'm on Twitter a lot, but it's building a community in the off season, so when we get time and fire up those mats in November for the college season, and of course, what's coming up this summer with the Olympic Games, you can have a little community to talk to. So if you're interested in that, mattalkonline.com/Discord, DISCORD. That's an app you can use on your phone, on your desktop. It's actually got a browser-based thing, but it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun in there, and little goofy conversations without the toxicity of some of the other social media platforms. So that's what we got. That's what we're doing. And right now, we're going to learn a little bit more about Dan Hodge in the finale of our 5-part Dan Hodge Tribute Series from Jack Roller of the World of Wrestling. And that's coming up now on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Because, as always, I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for Short Time.
My name is Jack Roller. I'm with the World of Wrestling, and we've been promoting wrestling tournaments for about 40 years. And it's just been a great experience. We've seen a lot of great kids come through and get to watch them at the Olympics and watch them in the NCAAs, and it's quite a pleasure.
When did you first discover who Dan Hodge was?
Gosh, I don't remember exactly what year, but I was scared to death to call him because I'd watched him wrestle and professionally, you know. And I just thought he was a great guy. My grandparents just loved him, you know, and I always had to watch him every Saturday. And so, I mean, that's how I knew him. And I was kind of a little bit intimidated to call him because I didn't figure he'd have time to really talk to me, and didn't, you know, and it was just really quite the opposite. I mean, he was just such a gentleman. And I told him what I wanted him to do is come in and help present the awards to the kids and try to, you know, in a sense, try to rejuvenate his career. You know, he was just, I don't know how many times Dolores, his wife, had told me, and also Dan, that, you know, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to him, that phone call. I just did not imagine that it would be, you know, that he would be that eager. Matter of fact, the first time he came out to one of our events, I'll never forget the look he gave me. I tried to slip $100 in his pocket, you know, $100 just covered his expenses. No big deal, you know. And sure enough, he looked like it made him mad. And I said, Dan, let me tell you now, if you don't take this, let me at least cover your expenses and all, which we ended up flying him everywhere we went and paying him pretty good money, but nothing like, you know, what he deserved. But, you know, he finally learned that he was going to take that little dab of money and he was going to be happy, and he was just thrilled to death. I tell people the thing that always amazed me was he was like the Pied Piper. You know, he'd walk down the hallway and those little kids would just be following him everywhere, you know, and they would idolize him, really. It was just amazing. But see, he always had time for every one of them. He would take him and set him on his knee, and he would talk to him, and he would show him all these holds and moves, you know, that he used to do. And it was kind of funny because not all those were legal today, but they were legal back then, you know. But, you know, he just had this way that, and, you know, I have to contradict you a little bit. You know, he said he's an idol in Oklahoma. I think probably the 30-some years that he did this with us, he became an idol all over the country. I mean, kids just idolized him. When he went up there and busted that apple, you ought to have seen their eyes, you know. He'd just squeeze it with one hand and then flip it and come and put it right in his mouth, you know, part of it. And he just had a way. He was kind of a pretty good showman. I guess that was a professional wrestling coming out, and he never got to wrestle MMA. He always kidded me. He'd say, boy, he said, if they'd have had that when I was younger, he said, it wouldn't have been fair because I could have really hurt somebody, you know. But and he really, to the day he died, probably still believed he could. I can tell you so many stories about Dan Hodge. It's just amazing.
Jack Roller had 4 wrestling sons, Keith, Jimmy, Michael, and Shane. His youngest son, Shane, was the most successful of the bunch on the college mats as he was a 3-time All-American for Coach John Smith at Oklahoma State. For the Roller Boys, they got a first-hand experience with one of the sports greats.
He laid in the living room floor with my boys, and we were pretty good friends, and he'd come and visit and lay there and show them how to do this and how to do that, and I think it influenced my boys an awful lot. Give them a hero to look up to, And I don't think it was just here in Oklahoma. I think if you ask around, it seemed like all these kids know everybody from, all over knows who Dan is.
After the car accident in the 1970s that shelved Hodge's professional wrestling career and pretty much took him out of the spotlight, it was through roller tournaments that Dan Hodge made his way back to the amateur wrestling ranks.
They just thanked us all the time for getting him. He said he's just sitting around, he just he'd always been in the spotlight, and then all of a sudden now all these little kids idolize him again. It's just like a rebirth of his popularity, It's kind of a strange thing, the way it evolved around. And it was one of the best calls I ever made because, there's an announcer that really had a lot to do with the professionalism that we try to. We want every kid that comes to World of Wrestling events to think they just wrestle in the Olympics. So we spend a lot of extra money and get huge trophies, and we do everything we can to make it really, really special for those kids. With Dan, he just had a knack about him, That's all I can say. But it's been at least probably, I hadn't been doing it a long time when I called him. Like I said, I was intimidated to make that call. And he didn't want to take any money for doing it. But it sure put him out in the limelight again. And that's why I say the only thing I disagreed with you is he was known by these kids all over the country. I mean, we usually have, like at Tulsa Nationals this year, we had 47 states represented, 2,500 athletes. And those are really, a lot of kids are, because we promoted it so hard, making it the toughest tournaments in the country. Some of them are intimidated to come, but Dan just fit in. We spotlighted at Tulsa Nationals this year. We took my son was Shane, my youngest son, was the first ever to win the Junior Hodge Award, which is supposedly the most dominant wrestler in high school. And so we took that trophy that he had received from Mike Chapman and all of them, and put it out in the middle of the arena, and the lights went out and spotlights hit it. And just a moment of silence for Dan, And again, that's not near what we want to do. We want to do so much more. We want to keep Dan's name alive, but there's just all kinds, like I say, little tales that I could tell about somebody challenging him and somebody not doing what he asked him to do, and he politely picked him up and set him outside. Opened the door with one hand, kept him in his arms, and set that grown man outside because he had asked him nice 2 or 3 times and shut that door, And so, just a lot of things flashed through my mind about Dan and, the things that have happened through all those years.
Gone are the days of, it used to be the paper brackets. Now things are digital. Kids got, their heads been phones, and they can watch their heroes. They can watch a match with David Taylor. They can watch a match with Jordan Burroughs. They can watch Kyle Snyder. How did you introduce this generation of kids that we have coming now, the technology generation, to somebody like Dan Hodge? And it's not like they can pull up their phone and watch very much video of him. How do you create, or how did you help create this larger than life image of somebody that, even some of these kids' parents or grandparents may not have actually understood who he was?
Well, that's true. They didn't even have a clue, a lot of them. But, when you paste everywhere, and in the program books, we put down his accomplishments, never taken down in a college career. We're not saying never lost. We're saying never taken down. And all the things that he accomplished, any wrestler, even a young wrestler that just starts, can think, golly, I've been taken down 20 times in, last 2 tournaments. So, to never be taken down. And, the stories just go on and on. Dan was just an unusual person that had that knack. And I've used several other people since Dan and several before. But none of them kind of had the true love for the kids, and loved the sport. Oh my gosh. But like I say, he never poured Dolores, in one of my little articles I wrote about him, and put in the last program book, really Dolores was a hero. She's the one that kept him there a lot, especially toward the end, She would bring him and have to sit there, and then she'd literally have to drag him out of there, because he would just stay and talk all night. I felt so sorry for her because, I knew she got tired just sitting there. And, but every kid, and again, those kids from Michigan and Alaska and Hawaii, they all know who Dan Hodge is now. We've done that. And how we did it was ads in the program book, just big pictures of Dan and the accomplishments that he had. And most of those people, they can really understand if he never lost a match in college, that's something, what? There's not many people can say that. Then they only had 3 years, so because a freshman could not wrestle. But the main thing about Dan was the personal side of him, and how much he had the true love for the kids, and that I'll never replace. I joke about that sometimes with A.L. Hazlip. He used to, he called it the NCAAs. He was an announcer, and we're kind of the one that started him out.
The aforementioned PA announcer A.L. Hazlip announced major wrestling tournaments across the country for well over a decade. He's currently the voice of Oklahoma State Cowboy Wrestling. But when it comes to the world of wrestling events, Roller says he wants to treat it like the Olympics. Well, there's a couple future Olympians that took part in these events growing up.
Like David Taylor, that's who those guys looked up to, was Dan. And then they went on now to do great things. I remember, he was being interviewed for the NCAAs, and he was quizzed. He said, now you got two NCAA champs in your bracket, and you got one other one that's an NCAA champ. Aren't you a little bit intimidated, you being a freshman, And he said, why in the world should I be intimidated? I've been going to Tulsa Nationals and seeing Mr. Hodge, and I've been in pressure situations since I was a little kid. So, no, I'm not intimidated by any of them. And, that's good. That kind of summarizes a lot of things, that all those guys, have been raised with Dan Hodge sitting on his knee. And those parents just, watched all that, and they just couldn't believe that he would take that much time with their son, and made it something special. Actually, I've had people tell me I'm coming to Reno Worlds just to see Dan Hodge, and, my kids are just driving me crazy to see Dan. So, so that's kind of neat that a lot of kids are a lot better than a lot of people give them credit for.
What does Dan Hodge mean to you in his place in the world of wrestling, whether it be international wrestling, collegiate wrestling, high school wrestling, youth wrestling? What do you think his legacy and importance is?
He's the greatest ambassador for the sport that we've ever had. That's the way I feel about him, and I think that's an easy question to answer. True ambassador for the sport of wrestling in almost every way that you could look at it. So that summarizes it. It's not the fact that he was undefeated in college, or that, he was a 3-time NCAA champ or something like that, or he's Olympian and all that. All that's great, but, just knowing his demeanor around him, and like my youngest son, Shane, just took over our company basically, and we're just staying on helping him run it now with this COVID hitting and all that stuff. And he said, man, he just influenced me so much when I was young, laying on that living room floor, So not everybody got that that opportunity, and so. But then he ended up winning that Dan Hodge Award for the high school the first year they did it, and that was really, we made a kind of a big deal out of that, Dan and him out in the middle and of the arena, and Shane also held the record for that, for Tulsa Nationals too. I think 8 championships. And so Dan just liked to feel like that he was part of that, and I'm telling you, he was. His dad might have put up all these motivational signs in every room, everywhere he looked, but Dan was his hero, I think. So.
One of Jack's sons, Michael, went to Oklahoma, just like Danny Hodge. Where would Shane Roller go? Oklahoma State.
Dan didn't like that too much, but he wanted Shane to go where he, thought he had the best opportunity. And it's hard to say that you can't learn a lot from a John Smith and, some of that coaching staff. Actually, he's got so many good friends from there that he wrestled with and then coached for a couple of years, finishing his master's. And so I think he made the right decision. He had some good friends. Kildegard was there at OU and several others that he really liked. And, and they could have had a good team.
What does Dan Hodge mean to an Oklahoman?
Well, there's, it's strange enough, that little city of Perry, there's several great wrestlers that have wrestled there, and Dan Hodge, I think, was really hurt that OSU didn't recruit him back when I forget who it was, Myron maybe, or somebody was there at that time, Myron Roderick. But he got recruited by OU and went there. And like you said, it was kind of touchy when Shane decided to go to OSU. But he never, ever seemed like that hurt his feelings. But I know he would have liked for Shane to be the next Dan Hodge at OU, But I can't say enough about Dan and the true love that we had for him and what he stood for and everything. So I regret that the last few years, we wasn't getting to be around him. He was getting confused quite a bit and had the dementia stuff and wouldn't even remember if you come. And Dolores told us, that it just upset him because when he can't remember somebody, he would get upset about it. Boy, he could really bluff his way through. He acted like he knew every one of those kids. I'm telling you, and he had no clue who they were. But boy, they thought that he remembered every one of them. When they'd come up there, oh, how's my buddy doing? Man, I haven't seen you in a while. And really, had seen him the last tournament probably, but he had a knack. So no, I could talk about Dan all day, and there's all kinds of stories that happen when people try to challenge him about. I hear that guy, there's a guy in here named Dan that's supposed to, this is in the hospitality room, supposed to be the strongest man around. And he said, I sure want to see that. I just got to see it to believe it. No, Dan told me later, said the tentacles just went straight up in the air. And he said, I got up and, the whole hospitality room was full at the time. And this guy was about 6'6" and weighed probably 240, 250. He wasn't fat. But he grabbed Dan's hand, and I swear, that guy went to his knees immediately. And don't break it. My God, I can't believe it, But we've seen that. A bunch of us seen that happen. It wasn't staged either. And he was still, at that time, he was probably 67 years old or 70. He's probably 70 at that time. There's lots of stories like that with Dan, but he's just like the gentle giant, And when he'd shake your hand, he'd put that other hand on top of it.
Yeah, he did that to me one time. That was the last time. I was actually trying. Here, sign this for me, sir, because I've got the Sports Illustrated on my wall. That I got him to sign it in 2016. So when I was down at the honors weekend, so.
I've got that.
That's a hard one to find too, and I found one in pretty good condition. Had it shipped to me overnight so I could take it down to honors weekend because I knew Dan Hodge was going to be there. So, boxing, wrestling, NCAA championships, Olympic Games, to the world of professional wrestling, and back to the grassroots wrestling level. From tiny Perry, Oklahoma, where there's a Perry Wrestling Monument Park with giant statues of Dan Hodge and Jack Van Beber, to the hallowed halls of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame and World Championship title runs in between,
the lore of Dan Hodge should only grow greater as time goes on. Anyone who ever knew him had a story to tell. And in the last 5 episodes of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, part of this Dan Hodge Tribute Series, you've heard some great stories from those who knew him. The only drawback there is you just want to hear more. At the end of this episode, I allude to the Sports Illustrated cover that sits about 5 feet away from me on my office wall. I'm not an Oklahoman. I've never actually been to Norman, Oklahoma. But Dan Hodge and his presence in wrestling is important to me, and it's important to the sport, no matter who you are. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank Mike Chapman, Leroy Smith, Gerry Brisco, Jim Ross, and Jack Roller for their contributions to this tribute series. Probably long overdue, but probably not even enough to scratch the surface on who Danny Hodge was as an individual and as a wrestler. You want to know more about Dan Hodge? Go to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame website at nwhof.org. The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Sportswear. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MatTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed, you're already listening, you love the show, and you want to support this show and this network, MatTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.